Hello everyone, here we are. We're going to continue with 2 Kings and we're going to start with 2 Kings 6. We had left off with Elisha with all of the prophets feeding them an abundance of bread from 20 loaves. So here we go. The company of the prophets said to Elisha, "Look, the place where we meet with you is too small for us. Let's go to the Jordan where each of us can get a pole and build us and let us build a place there for us to meet." And he said, "Go." Then one of them said, "Won't you please come with your servants?" "I will," Elisha replied, and he went with them. They went to the Jordan and began to cut down trees. As one of them was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water. "Oh no, my lord," he cried out, "it was borrowed." The man of God asked, "Where did it fall?" When he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it there and made the iron float. "Lift it out," he said. Then the man reached out his hand and took it. Now, the king of Aram, the Arameans again, was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officers, he said, "I'll set up my camp in such and such a place." The man of God sent word to the king of Israel, "Beware of passing that place, because the Arameans are going down there." So the king of Israel checked on the place indicated by the man of God. Time and again, Elisha warned the king so that he was on his guard in such places. This enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, "Tell me, which of us is on the side of the king of Israel?" "None of us, my lord the king," said one of his officers. "But Elisha the prophet who's in Israel tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom." In other words, we don't know how he's doing it, and we know how he's doing it. The Lord is showing him. But they're saying, we don't know how he's doing it, but obviously he's hearing every word you say, okay? "Go find out where he is," the king ordered, "so I can send men and capture him." The report came back, "He's in Dothan." Then he sent horses and chariots and a strong force there. They went by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. "Oh no, my lord, what shall we do?" the servant asked. "Don't be afraid," the prophet answered. "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So these were heavenly chariots. As the enemy came down toward him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, "Strike this army with blindness." So he struck them with blindness as Elisha had asked. Elisha told them, "This is not the road and this is not the city. Follow me and I'll lead you to the man you're looking for." And he led them to Samaria. After they entered the city, Elisha said, "Lord, open the eyes of these men so they can see." Then the Lord opened their eyes and they looked, and there they were inside Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he asked Elisha, "Shall I kill them, my father? Shall I kill them?" "Do not kill them," he answered. "Would you kill those you've captured with your own sword or bow? Set food and water before them so they may eat and drink and then go back to their master." So he prepared a great feast for them, and after they'd finished eating and drinking, he sent them away, and they returned to their master. So the bands from Aram stopped raiding Israel's territory. Sometime later, Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, mobilized his entire army and marched up and laid siege to Samaria, the place they just feasted in. There was a great famine in the city. The siege lasted so long that a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels of silver and a quarter of a cab of seed pods for 5 shekels. A donkey's head, that's gross when you're reduced to eating the head of a donkey. As the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried to him, "Help me, my lord the king." The king replied, if the Lord doesn't help you, where can I get help from? From the threshing floor? From the winepress? Then he asked her, what's the matter? She answered, this woman said to me, give up your son so we may eat him today, and tomorrow we'll eat my son. So we cooked my son and ate him. Remember, this is a terrible famine. A donkey's head is selling for a high price, okay? These people are starving. So we cooked my son and ate him. The next day I said to her, give up your son so we may eat him, but she had hidden him. When the king heard the woman's words, he tore his robes. As he went along the wall, the people looked and saw that under his robes he had sackcloth on his body. It's like burlap. It's not meant to feel good. It's like I don't want to say it's like a self-flagellation type thing where you're beating yourself up, but in a weird way, it's like, it's an emblem of, suffering. He said, may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if the head of Elisha, son of Shaphat, remains on his shoulders today. Now Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. The king sent a messenger ahead, but before he arrived, Elisha said to the elders, don't you see how this murderer is sending someone to cut off my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door and hold it shut against him. Is not the sound of his master's footsteps behind him? While he was still talking to them, the messenger came down to him. The king said, this disaster is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer? Okay, so let's recap here. Okay, so the king of Aram was at war with Israel. All right, and every word he said, Elisha was told by the Lord what he was saying. So he was able to keep the king of Israel from going into the traps that the king of Aram had set for him. Okay, so Aram got frustrated, and he wanted to go after Elisha in Dothan so that he can't tell the Israelite king anything anymore, because he wants to beat Israel down. He wants to capture them and probably murder their king. So Aram sent the army, but Elisha's servant said, oh my God, they're coming to get us. And he said, no, there's more with us than are with them. And it was because the hills were surrounded and Elisha could see it. And then his servant's eyes were open so he could see that the hills were covered with fiery chariots from heaven. Okay, so the Lord blinded the king of Aram's men for Elisha, and Elisha led them into Samaria, where, the king was like, I'll kill them for you if you want. He's like, no, just feed them and send them back to their master. So that's what happened, okay? So now, sometime later, Aram has gone back to lay siege to Samaria. Okay, the place that fed them and feasted with them and sent them on their way. It was merciful to them. Ben-Hadad said, no, I'm going to go back and lay siege to it. So he went to do that, and there was a great famine in the city, okay, in Samaria, I guess. And this is where a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels. That's a lot of money. If I remember correctly, a shekel is, worth something. It's weighty. 80 shekels of silver, and a quarter of a cab, C-A-B, of seed pods for 5 shekels. All right, as the king of Israel was passing by on a wall, a woman cried to him and told him that they were eating their children. That's how bad the famine was in Samaria. So the king already had humbled himself with sackcloth in front of the Lord, and he blamed all of this on Elisha. Okay, now this is the king of Israel, okay? Hold on. Yeah, the king of Israel. So the king of Israel is now blaming this whole problem on Elisha. He's saying, now remember, this isn't Judah. This isn't Jehoshaphat and the people that Elisha would respect. This is Israel. Okay, and now they're blaming Israel because Ben-Hadad has come back to lay siege to their city, which is already starving, or perhaps the siege has caused them to start starving. Because a lot of times I know in Rome, in the sacking of Rome, and I think it's not just in Rome, I think in a lot of these places, and clearly this is way before all of that stuff, but before Rome. But what I'm trying to say is in war, they used to block off cities and starve them out. Okay, I mean, it's just a battle tactic, apparently. They just starve the people in the cities out. And it looks like this is what's happening. Because it says, Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, mobilized his entire army and marched up and laid siege to Samaria. There was a great famine in the city. The siege lasted so long that a donkey's head. So he's starving them out, and they're eating their children under this siege, okay? So the king has humbled himself with the sackcloth and is probably, you know, relying on the Lord to save them. But now he's turned around and blamed it on Elisha, and said, you know, because Elisha brought the blinded soldiers into his city, and then he blessed them and sent them on their way, you know, fed them and sent them on their way. And now here they have come back and they've laid siege and they're starving them out, okay? So that's what's happening here. So Elisha was told by the Lord that they wanted to take his head from his shoulders. And So he's locked the door against him, and the king of Israel said, this disaster is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer? In other words, he's saying, screw you to the Lord. You know, you've done this to me. I'm not going to bother with you. I'm going to take all this into my own hands. So here we go with chapter 7. Elisha replied, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord says. About this time tomorrow, a seah of the finest flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria. The officer on whose arm the king was leaning said to the man of God, look, even if the Lord should open the floodgates of the heavens, could this happen? So Elisha's trying to tell him, hey, it's going to change by tomorrow. So, you know, they've come to take his head, but he's prophesied to them now, okay? And they're saying, you know, are you kidding us? Is this really going to happen? And he says, you'll see it with your own eyes, answered Elisha, but you will not eat any of it. Now, there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. They said to each other, why stay here until we die? If we say we'll go into the city, the famine is there and we'll die. If we stay here, we'll die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, then we die. At dusk, they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there. For the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army. So that they said to one another, look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittite and Egyptian kings to attack us. So they got up and fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. So the siege is now lifting from Samaria because they're running away. The men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp, entered one of the tents, and ate and drank. Then they took silver, gold, and clothes and went off and hid them. They returned and entered another tent and took some things from it and hid them also. Then they said to each other, what we're doing is not right. This is a day of good news and we're keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let's go at once and report this to the royal palace. So they're not going to keep, you know, plundering these individual houses. They're going to go say, hey, look, this is what happened. The Arameans are gone. Their stuff is there for us to take. So they went and called out to the city gatekeepers and told them, we went into the Aramean camp and no one was there. Not a sound of anyone, only tethered horses and donkeys, and the tents left just as they were. The gatekeepers shouted the news and it was reported within the palace, so no more siege. The king got up in the night and said to his officers, I'll tell you what the Arameans have done to us. They know we're starving, so they've left the camp to hide in the countryside, thinking they'll surely come out and then we'll take them alive and get into the city. One of his officers answered, have some men take 5 of the horses that are left in the city. Their plight will be like that of all the Israelites left here. Yes, they'll only be like all these Israelites who are doomed. So let us send them to find out what happened. So I guess he's saying either way, you know, it doesn't matter. Just send these guys in there and see what happens. So they selected 2 chariots with their horses, and the king sent them after the Aramean army. He commanded the drivers, go and find out what's happened. They followed them as far as the Jordan, and they found the whole road strewn with clothing and equipment the Arameans had thrown away in their headlong flight. So the messengers returned and reported to the king. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. Wow, what a turnaround, huh? So a seah of the finest flour sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley sold for a shekel, as the Lord had said. Now the king had put the officer on whose arm he leaned in charge of the gate, and the people trampled him in the gateway, and he died. Just as the man of God had foretold when the king came down to his house. It happened as the man of God had said to the king, about this time tomorrow, a seah of the finest flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria. The officer had said to the man of God, look, even if the Lord should open the floodgates of heaven, could this happen? You know, that's what it's like to be faithless, okay? I mean, he's got no faith whatsoever. Here's the man of God, you know, who's probably been proven right over and over, telling him tomorrow it's going to lift, and they've been so beaten down through, you know, what's going on around them, being starved out, that they just can't believe, okay? And when a prophet is speaking, you should believe, okay? You will see, then the man of God had replied, you'll see it with your own eyes, but you won't eat any of it. And that's exactly what happened to him, for the people trampled him in the gateway, and he died. Now the king had put the officer on whose arm he leaned in charge of the gate, and the people trampled him in the gateway, and he died. Officer had said, now the king had put, I'm just trying to figure out if the king died and the king came down to his house. Okay, so it was the guy who, the officer died, not the king. All right, so chapter 8, last chapter. Now Elisha had said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, go away with your family and stay for a while wherever you can, because the Lord's decreed a famine in the land that will last 7 years. The woman proceeded to do as the man of God said. She and her family went away and stayed in the land of the Philistines 7 years. At the end of the 7 years, she came back from the land of the Philistines and went to appeal to the king for her house and land. The king was talking to Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, and had said, tell me, hold on one second. Tell me about all the great things Elisha has done. Now, I wonder if this is the same Gehazi with the leprosy. Just as Gehazi, that Elijah had as a servant, just as Gehazi was telling the king how Elisha had restored the dead to life, the woman whose son Elisha had brought back to life came to the king for her house. Okay. The woman whose son Elisha had brought back to life came to appeal to the king for her house and land. Gehazi said, this is the woman, my lord the king, and this is her son whom Elisha restored to life. The king asked the woman about it, and she told him. Then he assigned an official to her case and said to him, give back everything that belonged to her, including all the income from her land from the day she left the country until now. Elisha went to Damascus, and Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, was ill. Now, before we get into this last bit here, I want to just talk about this Shunammite woman who left during the famine, and how I'm trying to pull the point of this out of here. She was gone. I'm thinking that it's showing us that she has favor because Elisha had brought her son back to life, okay? And so the official is honoring what she's been through and isn't screwing around with her. He's going to give her her land and her home back. Okay. Elisha went to Damascus, and Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, was ill. When the king was told, the man of God has come all the way up here, he said to Hazael, take a gift with you and go to meet the man of God. Consult the Lord through him. Ask him, will I recover from this illness? Hazael went to meet Elisha, taking with him as a gift 40 camel loads of all the finest wares of Damascus. He went, boy, it pays to be a prophet, huh? I mean, why? Because you're the Lord's servant, so the Lord takes care of you. And even I, in my very small space of Christianity, people are kind to me too. Now, I'm not saying I'm a prophet like Elisha. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is I give the word to a lot of people, and people honor me. I've had things given to me. I've had jewels. I've had money given to me by people who are so grateful to get the word. Now, I didn't solicit these things. I'm thinking of two dear friends of mine. One who wrote me a letter and said, thank you so much for helping me to see and receive Jesus Christ. And when I ended up in a financial pinch, he sent money. And this was 35 years ago now, or 30 years ago now. But the point is I felt very rewarded for everything that I had labored to give him regarding the Lord. Another was a girlfriend of mine that I'd had since I was 10 years old, and she happened to be into jewelry. And, I gave her the gospel, and she sent me beautiful jewels. And I felt rewarded. I felt like, wow, and it was given as a thank you. Once again, thank you for telling me the gospel. So it's amazing what happens. It's amazing. All right. Will I recover from this illness? Ben-Hadad is asking Elisha. Elisha answered, go and say to him, you will certainly recover. Nevertheless, the Lord has revealed to me that he will in fact die. He stared at him with a fixed gaze until Hazael was embarrassed. Then the man of God began to weep. Why is my Lord weeping? Asked Hazael. Because I know the harm you will do to the Israelites, he answered. You will set fire to their fortified places, kill their young men with the sword, dash their little children to the ground, and rip open their pregnant women. Wow. So he's saying, you're going to recover from your illness, but you're going to die. And then he's pointing at Hazael and saying, you're going to do some real harm. Hazael said, how could your servant, a mere dog, accomplish such a feat? Meaning himself. How could I do something like this? The Lord has shown me that you will become king of Aram, answered Elisha. Then Hazael left Elisha and returned to his master. When Ben-Hadad asked, what did Elisha say to you? Hazael replied, he told me you would certainly recover. But the next day he took a thick cloth, soaked it in water, and spread it over the king's face so that he died. So he smothered him. Then Hazael succeeded him as king. In the 5th year of Joram, son of Ahab, king of Israel, when Jehoshaphat was king of Judah, Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, began his reign as king of Judah. So now we have Hazael ruling Aram. We have Joram, the son of Ahab, ruling Israel. And we have Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, reigning as king over Judah. He was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel, as the house of Ahab had done, for he married a daughter of Ahab. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So this is Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Nevertheless, for the sake of his servant David, the Lord was not willing to destroy Judah. Now, it's been a long time since they've had a wicked king, and here it is. He had promised to maintain a lamp for David and his descendants forever. Remember, he promised that. In the time of Jehoram, Edom, E-D-O-M, Edom, Esau's line of people, rebelled against Judah and set up its own king. So Jehoram went to Zair with all his chariots. Zair, Z-A-I-R. The Edomites surrounded him and his chariot commanders, but he rose up and broke through by night. His army, however, fled back home. To this day, Edom has been in rebellion against Judah. Libnah, L-I-B-N-A-H, revolted at the same time. As for the other events of Jehoram's reign and all he did, are they not written in the books of the annals of the kings of Judah? Jehoram rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David, and Ahaziah, his son, succeeded him as king. So this is another Ahaziah, because I think one of Ahab's sons was also Ahaziah. In the 12th year of Joram, son of Ahab, king of Israel, Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 1 year. His mother's name was Athaliah, a granddaughter of Omri, king of Israel. He followed the ways of the house of Ahab and did evil in the eyes of the Lord as the house of Ahab had done. So now we've got 2 kings in a row in Judah. After 35 years of Jehoshaphat following the Lord, now we've got these 2 nutty, evil sons. He followed the ways of the house of Ahab and did evil in the eyes of the Lord as the house of Ahab had done, for he was related by marriage to Ahab's family. Ahaziah went with Joram, son of Ahab, to war against Hazael, king of Aram, at Ramoth Gilead. The Arameans wounded Joram, so King Joram returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds the Arameans had inflicted on him at Ramoth in his battle with Hazael, king of Aram. Then Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to Jezreel to see Joram, son of Ahab, because he had been wounded. And they must be fast friends because they both do evil in the style of Ahab's house. So I love you very much. I will see you very soon tomorrow, and we'll pick it up with 2 Kings chapter 9. And I believe this book is even shorter than 1 Kings, so we're probably halfway through it already. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.